On September 10th, 2025, far-right political commentator Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while doing a speaking event at a university in Utah. There was obviously a lot of speculation immediately as to who the shooter would be, considering that the victim in this case happened to be a far-right political commentator. Now, a lot of people didn't have a lot of hope that the killer would actually be caught, considering that the FBI is currently headed by a conspiracist podcaster named Kash Patel. Nonetheless, a photo that was released eventually led to the killer's father turning him in. Let's start, of course, with the fact that the day before, the Wall Street Journal published a story that gave the right all the ammunition they needed once again to target trans people by saying the ammunition in the Kirk shooting was engraved with transgender anti-fascist ideology, according to sources. Unfortunately, it may seem like one of those sources happens to have been Steven Crowder, because Steven Crowder had made an announcement saying that he has an exclusive memo that came to his team from an officer at the ATF. However, it wasn't long before the New York Times issued this, which happens to be very important. Senior law enforcement official with direct knowledge of the investigation cautioned that the report may not have been verified by the ATF analysis and did not match other summaries of the evidence, and might turn out to be misread or misinterpreted. Now keep that term misinterpreted in mind, because we're about to reveal what the bullets actually said.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices bulges, capital O-W-O, what's this question mark?" Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow," and a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
What's that, you say? Confused? Doesn't make any sense? What the hell do all these words mean? Am I not terminally online enough? I guess this is really an indication that places like the Wall Street Journal need to hire some younger people on their staff, or at least what I would consider to be called internet person. You know, someone who actually understands memes, the terminally online brain. We're at a point now where it's like, all it takes is the word bulge to have been written somewhere, and that suddenly makes the shooter trans? Like, what are we doing here? What the hell is going on? Not to mention, these references are now being used to dictate that the shooter, in fact, was leftist, dedicated to the partisans of the Italian resistance, who fought against the occupying troops of Nazi Germany and the collaborationist fascist forces during the liberation of Italy. So, pretty conclusive there, right? I mean, we got ourselves a far radical leftist anti-super soldier if ever I saw one. But that's only the start of the story, because, believe me, friends, things get way stranger from here on out. So for starters, the shooter comes from a family of registered Republicans. The father was a minister, a former law enforcement officer, and they also had members of the military in their family. They also introduced their son, who became the shooter, to guns at a very young and early age, which would explain his marksmanship and why he was able to make a shot like he did from 200 yards away. It should also be stated immediately that it turns out the shooter was, yes, once again a case of a white cis male. Not a trans person, and not an immigrant. So that brings us to the next part of the story, the Groypers. If you don't know what a Groyper is, they are followers of Nick Fuentes, a very far-right, extreme, white supremacist, Holocaust-denying. You know what? I'll just give you guys an acronym for him. Not a very zealous individual. A big old piece of shit. But the thing is, Nick Fuentes was a far-right reactionary who oftentimes actually hated Charlie Kirk, specifically because Charlie Kirk didn't go far-right enough.
Charlie Kirk says, did you see this clip? He goes, your Generation Z sons have negative views about Israel. You need to tell them this, time out. You need to tell them, time out. He said, if you feel like a loser, if you feel like your country's been destroyed, get a second job. Get a Hillsdale online course. Observe the Shabbos. He literally said this. I am hurtling towards you, full force, going nearly 90 miles per hour, weighing close to 1,500 pounds. I am hurtling towards you like a human missile.
This is what the Groyper War is. In the fall of 2019, Charlie Kirk launched a college speaking tour with Turning Point USA titled Culture War, featuring himself and special guests such as Rand Paul, Donald Trump Jr., and Kimberly Guilfoyle. In retaliation for the firing of St. Clair and the Politicon incident, Fuentes began organizing a social media campaign asking his followers to go to Kirk's events and ask provocative and controversial leading questions about his stances on immigration, Israel, and LGBTQ+ rights to expose Kirk as a, quote, fake conservative. At a culture war event hosted by Ohio State University on October 29th, 11 of the 14 questions were asked by Groypers. Their questions included, can you prove that our white European ideals will be maintained if the country is no longer made up of white European descendants? They asked Kirk's co-host Rob Smith, a gay black Iraq War veteran, how does anal sex help us win the culture war? Fuentes' social media campaign against Kirk became known as the Groyper Wars. Kirk, Smith, and others at Turning Point USA, including Benny Johnson, began calling the questioners white supremacists and anti-Semites, which is just wild. What is this, the woke right?
Fuentes! This guy is
going down in the mud
Because
with someone.
he gave a 45-minute speech about
You're
me.
only repeating that because you're trying to make yourself sound important and you're not.
They've been swearing it for years. This is the only time we can get him is when he's crossing the street and he uses, I guess he's just like the Palestinians using human shields, right?
Just a quick summary. There's been a long-standing war between Nick Fuentes' audience, known as the Groypers, and Charlie Kirk's audience. In a lot of ways, Nick Fuentes doesn't believe that Charlie Kirk went far enough, that he was actually pulling people away from potential radicalization into more far-right extremism. To him, he saw Charlie Kirk as someone who was diluting their movement, and asked his followers to oftentimes troll him or prank him in a variety of ways. Fast forward to today and looking at the evidence of who the shooter was. The song Bella Ciao, the Hugel remix, is actually a prominent song used amongst the Groyper community, and this song also appears in a lot of video games. Something that Groypers do is to reappropriate elements of the left, such as, songs that are anti-fascist in order to mock fascism, taking a song such as Bella Ciao and then using it as a way to, again, ridicule and mock those that they consider to be Antifa, anti-fascists, etc. Also evidence that the shooter dressed up as a Pepe meme for Halloween. However, it should also be added that this is skinny Pepe, which is different than the regular Pepe. I know this might be a little much. There's actually different tiers of Pepe. The 22-year-old suspect, alleged to have killed right-wing activist Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University on Wednesday, left behind some unusual clues for investigators. Utah Governor Spencer Cox said at a press conference on Friday that federal investigators had found engraved messages on bullet casings, including, "Hey fascist, catch, up, right, down, down, down." This is a reference to dropping a 500-kilogram bomb in the video game Helldivers 2. Now, if you're wondering, isn't Helldivers 2 ultimately a satire of fascism itself? You would be correct, and the game is enormously popular in a number of communities. The problem with Helldivers 2 is it's also extremely popular amongst the far-right and Groyper communities. Now, this whole thing goes a little bit back to media literacy, as to why exactly there are so many things that are appropriated by the right to the far-right when they think those things happen to be fascistic or celebrating fascism, when in fact they happen to be satires or mocking them. Look no further than the movie Starship Troopers.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
Men and women from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
The game has been celebrated and is oftentimes played amongst the far-right communities because they don't see it as satire or parody. They sell it as a celebration of, again, their fascistic and or pro-Hitler beliefs. Arrow symbols that match the input required to execute a stratagem in Helldivers 2. That stratagem, the Eagle 500-kilogram bomb, lets players drop a 1,100-pound bomb that embeds itself in the background before exploding. It's one of the more destructive special moves in the game. Other shells had different messages engraved on them, including, "Notice bulge," "Owo," or "Iwu," "What's this?" A reference to a meme about furries in online roleplay. "Oh, Bella Ciao," "Bella Ciao," "Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao," a reference to an Italian anti-fascist song from 1953. And, if you read this, you are gay, Lamau, which is seemingly a little more than a shitposty gotcha meme. While the Helldivers 2 reference is getting much more attention, particularly in the wake of U.S. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. partially blaming video games for gun violence earlier this month, the alleged shooter's message appears chaotic and influenced by online discourse. Something about Helldivers 2 do makes the people taking it too seriously a very big problem. The community has been expanding on the game's thematic propaganda since its launch, including anything from fan-made posters that give burst slogans to things like Spill Oil, to the Super Earth broadcast, a fan-run TikTok account that shares daily updates about the Galactic War. Several interviewees said these community creations convinced them to purchase the game. Most found its satirical perspective was easy to roleplay around and create fan-made content that adds to the world building. Others expressed concerns for those players who are taking it to an extreme. The problem here isn't actually the bigots. Those are unfortunate facts of life that can never be fully eradicated. The problem is that Arrowhead's official spaces have made the deliberate decision to silence LGBTQ+ voices under the guise of banning any political discussion, as if people's identities are political, and as if this game was now created and marketed by a heavy-handed piece of political satire. But bringing this all back, what do we actually know? Well, for starters, the fact that the shooter is once again, as is often the case, a white, cis male. In this case, the shooter happens to come from a registered Republican family, a family of ex-military, ex-cops, and preachers. These are right-wing individuals. They were heavily into guns, they had a lot of legal firearms, and they were into guns training for their children. So beyond that, we don't actually know what the motivation is. In terms of conclusive evidence, everyone who has been speculating up until this point that this happens to be a left-wing extremist, or someone who is trans, or someone who is part of a vulnerable community who are already facing a lot of violence towards them, was simply doing that to incite more violence. This is something in which the right has been inciting violence non-stop, despite the fact that oftentimes, as is the case, the shooters turn out to be right-wing or Trump supporters. The man who targeted and killed Democrat state lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark in their home in Minnesota in June was a Trump supporter. The man who was charged with the attempted assassination of Pennsylvania's Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro in April was a Trump supporter. The man convicted of orchestrating a series of shootings at the homes of 4 Democratic elected officials in New Mexico in 2022 was a Trump supporter. The man who tried to kidnap the Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and assault her husband Paul in 2022 was a Trump supporter. The men who wanted to hang Mike Pence on January 6, 2021 were Trump supporters. The man who killed his son of Obama-appointed district judge Ether Salas in 2020 was a Trump supporter. The men who were convicted of trying to kidnap Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020 were Trump supporters. The man who sent pipe bombs to the homes of Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and other top Democrats in 2018 was a Trump supporter. The man who killed left-wing activist Heather Heyer after driving his car into a crowd of counter-protesters in Charlottesville in 2017 was a Trump supporter. Something that also should be covered is that the same day that Charlie Kirk was shot, a 16-year-old boy who's accused of shooting 2 classmates at Evergreen High School has been revealed to be a conspiratorial, anti-Semitic, and white supremacist who is radicalized over social media. Also from a thread by Robert Downen, senior writer at Texas Monthly. I'm not in any way speculating, but I'm actually shocked how few people know that Charlie Kirk has been for years amongst the most reviled people on the planet by white supremacists, many of whom are radicalized by sustained campaigns painting him as an anti-white fraud. Again, I'm not speculating about the shooter, I just have been stunned about how quickly people have jumped with certainty by partisan conclusions, because in extremist spaces, the Charlie Kirk hater to Nazi pipeline is canon. It's how we got a generation of anti-Semitic extremists.
This bad stuff happens, and for 33 hours, I was praying that if this had to happen here, that it wouldn't be one of us, that somebody drove from another state, somebody came from another country. Sadly, that prayer was not answered the way I hoped for, just because I thought it would make it easier on us if we could just say, hey, we don't do that here.
Thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet One 85, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.